And the recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be posted also on the website. And so for today's webinar, well, we tried to make it only a listen-only mode, but we are going to figure that out, and we'll be using polls and as well as chat pods, and please use the chat pods for any questions and also for content or technical assistance, as well as responses to the questions that we'll be asking later. And a brief link to the evaluation will appear at the end of the webinar. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. This is Larry Condelli. I'm here with some of my colleagues in DC, Ruth Sugar and Keely Clark, and also Michelle Perry. And we're going to be doing this session today where we're going to review the NRS, the changes to the NRS table. We're also going to give you a activity packet that you can use to train your local programs on the changes. And we'll be going over that soon. We're trying to mute everything. I'm sorry. Background noise. You could mute your phone or your line. Those of you on the line, that would really help us out. Okay. So the agenda today is first I'm going to go over a little bit about the new NRS Technical Assistance Guide. It's not so new, but just point out a few things that you might have missed. Then we're going to go right into the tables. We're going to talk about the changes to the tables. We're not going to go over all the tables, just the tables that have been changed. And then we'll have a brief review of the activity packet for your use. And I think you'll all have received that in your email announcing the webinar. And if you haven't, we will make it available on the website or email it to you if you request it. So I'm just going to start right in. And let you know, as I mentioned, we're trying to, this is one of a series of Train the Trainer webinars and in-person trainings we do to help states train their local providers on using NRS tables and as well as other accountability issues around WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So today, we are going to specifically, as I mentioned, focus on, next slide please, the NRS TA guide. For a few minutes, I'd like to explain some of the things in there that are important, go over the tables requirements for the tables that have changed, and help you identify your training needs and show you the training materials and activities we've developed that you can use with your local programs or others in your state that you'd like to train on the NRS tables. So again, I want to point out we're only going to go over the tables that have changed, and this discussion refers to tables that you will report in October 2019, not this year, but next year, October 2019. The program year that starts July 1 through this year and ends on June 30th of 19. This is the period where you will use the tables that we're going to be talking about now. So up until, this year, 2018 reporting, you will still use the tables you used last year. All right, so let's look at the new NRS Technical Assistance Guide, which is available on our newly revised website. It replaces what we used to call the NRS Implementation Guidelines. And it came out about mid-January, I believe, right after the new year. And we made it available to everybody, and I think you probably it's got quite a number of downloads. What we did in this guide is we updated everything, of course, to WIOA, and we put all of the WIOA requirements and NRS-specific requirements around reporting and accountability in one place for you. So it includes links to some of the OCTAE and WIOA program memoranda on accountability that are common to all the partners, and includes all of the reporting tables. If you've looked at it, you'll see Appendix A has 5 different links to different memorandum. We didn't just include those in the actual document because they're quite lengthy, but there are links to them. Memorandum 17.2, which is all of the accountability requirements for WIOA Title 1, 2, 3, and 4. Memorandum 17.5, which is how you use funds reserved for activities under Section 243 of AFLA. And Memorandum 17.6, which talks about supplemental wage information, so how you can collect supplemental data to meet the wage and employment requirements of WIOA. And Memorandum 17.7, which is how you report your annual report, how you submit that and report it. And it is additional joint guidance on data matching. So all of that is linked in Appendix A. It is not directly in there. The other thing about we have in Appendix C is all the tables, current tables, as well as the ones we're discussing here, the new tables that will go into effect in 2019, for 2019 reporting. Next thing, one other thing I want to show about the new TA guide is that it contains the EFL descriptors, both the new ones and the current ones. So as you know, we have been revising the EFL descriptors to be more up-to-date and linked to the CCR standards and the new ELP standards that have been developed. And these descriptors have been written for the next generation of tests. So far, only 2 tests are aligned to these new ADE descriptors, which is the table 11, 12, and CASA's reading goals. They are aligned to the new descriptors in Appendix B. All the other tests that we're currently using are just following the same EFL descriptors that we have for many years, shown in Exhibit 2.2 of the TA guide. And they will remain in effect until all of the new tests are developed to align to the new descriptors and until the current tests are no longer approved for use. So we're still working on, the publishers are working, and we're working on getting new tests that will replace these old ones. And that time, what's in Appendix B will become common to all tests. But as of now, we're using 2 sets of descriptors, the 2.2 for the current test and those in Appendix B for the AD ones in Appendix B for Table 11, 12, and CASA's reading goal. Okay, so those are just the highlights I wanted to point out. On the new TA guide, as I mentioned, there's 2 other appendices. Appendix C, just simply the time lag for reporting the post-exit indicators. As you know, the post-exit indicators have a multi-year time lag, so it's going to be another couple of years before we have full data on this. And Appendix D is just the sample surveys and the methodology for collecting the post-exit indicators with the survey, which is one of the approved supplemental methods for the post-exit indicators. And that's actually carryover from the old TA guidelines that we had, the implementation guidelines. So that's what's in the appendices. I think you're familiar with the rest of the guidance. I think one other point is that we are developing a ebook of the TA guide, a much more attractive version and easier to navigate version that will soon be available, I would say, within the next few weeks. It'll be easier to navigate it. It will look better. Also, it is made to be used on websites and tablets and your phone and mobile devices. So it's bringing us a little more up to date, and I think you'll appreciate its attractiveness for when you need to look things up, and its ease of use. And then we will continue to have the current TA guide on the website with a PDF format. Okay, so I'm just going to move into the tables now. We can move the slides ahead. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. We're going to talk first about some current tables that will be changed for next year. And the changes are not great, but I thought it would be important to go over them at this point. So there are tables 4 and 5. And also some really minor changes to 8 and 10. So let's start with the changes to Table 4. Move ahead on the slide. Next slide. Okay, so here's what the table 4 that you'll be using beginning reporting for 2019 looks like. I've highlighted in yellow what has changed. Very simply, first off, there's been some confusion about because first period of participation and subsequent periods of participation. And as you know, in our current table 4, first part of it, as you see there, A through J, I guess, are A through G rather are first period of participation. Then we have a column for other periods of participation. All we did was label those more clearly so you could see what they are. But the additions that we added are two things. First of all, we added a column to include exclusions, which we've not had before. And as you know, there are exclusions to MSG in WIOA, and those have been covered, such as people who enter military service or incarceration or medical conditions or that are deceased, that we do not need to count in the performance report. We've had no way of excluding those formally before, and now this new column will allow you to do that. So you'll put your excluded participants in column C. That's one change. The other thing we did in Table 4 for next year is break out the calculation for MSG related to, MSG and achievement of a secondary credential. So you can calculate separately the percentage of participants for periods of participation who achieved an educational functioning level gain and those that achieved a secondary school diploma or its equivalent. So it lets you break that percentage out specifically. So the next slide will show you why we did that. Next slide is, so just for counting, so we can formally exclude participants, and we can look separately at EFL gain and secondary credential attainment for periods of participation for that particular indicator. Okay. Yeah, they enable calculation without excluded participants, and they allow for the disaggregation. Right. So here we have questions. What are the questions?
I'm not right now.
Larry, can you hear me this day?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We have some questions here about Table 4, the previous slide. One from Lindy Messer and one from Louise Miller.
Correct. I'm just getting those to right now. K and L are, what is the question? Unduplicated. K and L unduplicated. Let me just take a look. Well, they're numbers of periods of participation, so if they would not be, oh, I see what you're saying. Are the one or the other unduplicated? Yes. So if your person got a MSG for educational functioning, you put them there, and one that got a period of participation, you put them in L. Second question, what about those who withdrew and enrolled in post-secondary? Those are all counted in Table 4. No one is excluded from Table 4. That is not a valid exclusion. The WIO exclusions are, as I said, a medical condition, calling up to military service, deceased, or what's the other one? There's a J or Alan. What's the other exclusion I'm missing on? There's specific exclusions. Just because someone withdrew and entered post-secondary, that is not an exclusion that's counted in column C. Where he says if a student gets an HSE in POP2 and had a pre-post gain in POP1, are they reported in both POP1 and PO2? I'm not following your question. If a student gets an HSE in POP2 and had a pre-post gain in POP1, then it's reported in both. Yes, they are. And Terry treated EFLs, they get a diploma. I understand they included just 1 and 2 know which to report on. Okay. Terry says, Terry TAC A, T, and L are treated like E and F, and they get a diploma. They are not an E or K. Okay. That's right. Okay. Other questions? So in other words, multiple outcomes are permissible in K and L. That's the question. And
Great explanation.
all right. No, your periods of participation that you're going to report are just the way they are now. They are going to be just the same rules you have now. You only can count 1 outcome and per period of participation. So that column in M is what you reported. It was reported in the state performance report. That's your WEO indicator. That M at the very bottom, grand total. The breakouts are just a way to break out for us to see how many people got diplomas and how many people got EFL gains. So it's for a different purpose. So in other words, the old way you do it still remains. This is just an additional way to break out K and L, to break up those 2 outcomes so that we have that transparency. All right? Okay, next slide, please. There's still only one MSG, right, only one MSG per POP. That's right, Kelly, you have it correct. So there's only one person get an EFL gain during one POP, and they could earn another gain in the second POP. That's correct. All right, Michelle, are you on the line?
I'm here. So what continue typing your questions in the chat. We can answer some more of those later, but right now we're going to pull up some chat pods. And if you can go ahead and respond to these 2 questions, what can be done with the data at the state level, and what can be done with the data at the program level for data entered into Table 4. And we'll give you a few minutes to respond to that. Okay, it looks like multiple people are still typing. We'll give you just a couple more seconds to complete what you're typing.
Okay, so if you're typing something, finish your thought. Some of the responses we've received so far: what can be done with the data at the state level, compare outcomes by EFL, identify needs for professional development, program performance, monthly desk auditing or desk monitoring. Any other, anything that hasn't been listed here that Larry or anyone else wants to add to this list? Let's see. Lindy says, see if students are having multiple POPs. That's a great one to use it for. What can be done with the data at the program level? As was mentioned at the state level, you can also use it to design and implement professional development, check gains enrollments and HSEs, identify cohorts, see which EFLs are succeeding. Target interventions is a good one based on performance level by level. Program improvement, guidance on in-service training. Anything else to add to this list? A couple people are typing. Larry, do you have anything additional to add to these two lists?
No, that's I think what our primarily idea, the main idea behind this was so we could look separately at gains achieved through EFL levels, pre and post testing, and counter gains and entry into secondary with secondary school diploma. So we wanted to break that out separately, and that's the main purpose of the table. And yes, it can be used for all these other things. Number of POPs, what kind of gains participants are getting, percentage of participants, and all these things that you've mentioned. Identify post-test rates and exclusions and all those things that you brought up.
Okay, so take a look at this list. If there's anything that you hadn't thought about, keep it in mind. And we will move on to the next table.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, so Table 5 will also be changed, or has also changed for next year. Take a look at that. First thing, again, we've clarified what goes into what each column, first period of participation versus all periods of participation because we had a lot of comments that was confusing. So just to make that very clear. And the other thing we've added is a new row that attained any credential unduplicated. So this is to put in the number of participants who achieved a credential in an unduplicated count. So either a post-secondary credential or a secondary credential meeting the criteria of after getting your credential, you got a job or enter post-secondary ed. So that's the old table, the current table 5, the counts are duplicated within there. What we wanted to do in that table was break out, particularly with the secondary diploma. Remember, you have to the student either has to enter post-secondary or get employed within 1 year of exit. So we wanted to break that out to look at how people were achieving that credential. But the problem with that is it created duplicate counts. And in the state performance report, you cannot have duplicated counts. So by having this new row where we just put the unduplicated count, it now then aligns with the state performance report. And that was the idea behind it. So there would be one table that had all the information we needed around credentials. So anyone who got a secondary school diploma, meeting, of course, all the criteria that goes into that, don't have a high school diploma before, et cetera, and whether they got a job or in a post-secondary, and also the post-secondary attainment. Because as you know, the state performance report indicator combines both credentials. So this way it was able to, so we could look at the federal level at the adult ed performance, both how did they achieve those credentials and what credentials were achieved, but it also gives us now this new row, a way to look at the unduplicated count, which is the same as what is reported in the state performance report. Okay. So why we're doing this is, first of all, to more clearly designate the headings about peer participation in the first enrollment. And we've done the same thing with these other tables 4, 4C, 5A, which are related to table 4, and 8, 9, 10, and 11, which are related to, we also have the indicators related to 4 and 5. So as I said, the new table row gives a consolidated value for credentials that will be used in the rate for the state performance report. We're hoping this confuses, the headings eliminate confusion that we have from comments we received from earlier versions of the table. All right, so we have some questions.
Yeah. Maria mentioned that she and Kelly asked a similar question, but the answer seemed slightly different. So going back up to Maria's question, this is before the current slide we're on. If a student gets an HSE in POP 2 and had a pre and post gain in POP 1, is the MSG reported as HSE for both POP 1 and POP 2? And then Kelly's question was then only one MSG per POP, right? So one person could earn an EFL level gain?
Whoa, let me do the first question.
Okay.
The first question was, yes, HSE, as always, this table doesn't change any of that. In multiple periods of participation, if you get a high school equivalency, it can apply to all periods of participation. That is always our policy. What's the other question? What was the next one?
Kelly asked only one MSG per POP, correct? So one person could earn an EFL level gain during one POP, and the same person could earn a secondary credential in a second POP.
That's correct, yeah.
Then Gilda asked, how would you use data on how gains are earned from the last discussion that was done?
Well, at the federal level, we would use it just to see, just as a descriptive indicator, a descriptive measure for us to know, are these MSGs, how are they being achieved, which is, so it gives transparency. At the state level, you could use it for that as well. You may have other reasons. That's one of the questions we kind of asked in the discussion, how you might use that.
Okay. Lindy asked, if a student has multiple POPs, then the student has multiple exits. Which exit timeline should be used for the unduplicated count?
Well, the first enrollment is the first POP, and if there's an exit, it's of course a 90-day period is weighted. If the person doesn't come back, that's the end of it. If the person does, then a second POP counts. So what is the question on that? I don't know what else to say about that. So each POP then has indicators that could apply to it and follow-up that could apply to it if it's a post-exit indicator is involved.
Okay. Sarah then asked, what does, quote, any credential mean? For example, would a safe serve or OSHA count?
Well, there's a list of recognized post-secondary credentials you should consult. I believe that's in Memorandum 17.2. And Jay or Alan, if there's another place, let me know.
Thomas asked for clarification.
Well, I think her question, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think maybe possibly Sarah's questions maybe even just a little simpler than that. When we say any credential on Table 5, what we mean is if you reported them as a positive outcome for the secondary credential row above that, or the post-secondary credential row above that. So what that means, any credential, means whether they got a secondary or post-secondary credential. If you recorded that person in each of the rows above, we want you in this new row to record them one time. And the credential that you count for this row awarded any credential would be the most recent, the last credential that they earned. It doesn't matter if it was post-secondary or secondary. We'd like you to count that student one time on this row for the last credential that they earned. And Larry's right, there is a list of credentials that are illustrative in the guidance, but there may be other state-recognized credentials that we don't have explicitly listed in the guidance. But if SafeServe or OSHA, if those are state-recognized post-secondary credentials, then those would be able to be counted as a post-secondary credential.
Thomas asked for clarification. A student may have multiple gains per POP, but is credited with at most one MSG per POP, correct?
For MSG, yes, you only get one MSG per period of participation. That's correct. Nothing in these tables changes any of our policy. It's simply what are we trying to do in these new tables is there's one table that reports that we'll talk about IET, but all of the other tables are sort of to break out performance in a more transparent way. So none of the policies have changed. So maybe that's confusing. I'm going to go back to Table 4. Can you go back to Table 4? Because there seems to be a lot of confusion here, and that may be my fault for not explaining it correctly. It's still the same policy, one POP, one MSG. So you get a high school credential and a test gain, you got an MSG. And there's only one in every POP. And so all that calculation is exactly the same. The only difference is, in column C we have exclusions, so they're taken out of your denominator for calculation. And for K and L, the new columns, they're just to break out the number of participants who achieved a gain through a high school diploma or a test. Did someone mute their phone? Thank you. So that's all. It's not any difference in policy. One MSG, one gain, one POP, per POP or not if there was no gain, or any kind of credential or whatever the rules are. They have not changed. And that table's filled out exactly the same way. The only addition is, as I say, exclusions, so you don't count them in the denominator anymore. And we just want to know who got gains, how many of them got gains through EFL tests, through pre and post testing rather, or other ways, and the ones who got secondary diplomas as their MSG. Okay, so MSG is just a way of breaking out secondary diploma out of Table 4. So we can look to see how many people are getting MSGs from secondary credentials. What percentage, and that's based on, of course, periods of participation. So there's no change in any of the policies. Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
And Venu asked a question earlier about column M, and he was saying it looks like column M, he wasn't really understanding that, and I can see now why that was a little confusing, because the percentage that's calculated in column M, and we have this in the technical assistance guide under Table 4, we have the instructions for how column M is calculated. It is K plus L, so that would be 4 plus 4 divided by column J. So it's 8 divided by 15, which should be higher than 26%. I think what's happening in this table is, for some reason, the formula in this illustrative or sample table is only taking one of the 4s and dividing it by the 15. So really it should be column K plus column L divided by column J. And it is correct below in ESL level 1, if you look at that, it's 14 divided by 25 is 56%. So it's those two columns, K and L, divided by J should give you the total percentage in column M. And it's just, there's a couple rows here where the percentage is not right for some reason. So
Move on. Thank you, Jay. All right, let's continue with the questions for Table 5. Would you move on to Table 5? There we go. Okay, Kelly.
So
Kelly's asking, no,
No.
please go to Table 5. Why column B? Who's in column B? And of course, these are not cohorts anymore. They're not anyone who took the GED test. Kelly's question is, how is cohort determined? Any learners who have taken exited and taken all 5 tests? No, who goes in that cohort are any individual who was in a secondary education program who did not already have a high school equivalency when they entered. So doesn't matter how many tests you've taken or not. That's everybody who is in a secondary education program who did not already have a high school diploma. And who exited, of course. You have to exit. So that is a policy we've had for now since WEO was in place.
then Vinu asks, is the last row on Table 5 used to evaluate state performance?
Yeah, the new, the last row, the last cell, that is the WEOA indicator for credential. That will be used. It's the same thing. It'll be all the unduplicated credentials over periods of participation.
Russell asked, would the 4 ESL and 4 HSE earned in columns K and L equal 8 MSG?
Where is that?
Oh, not like that.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
4. Table 4.
Oh, table 4.
yeah, we talked about that. That's about table 4 where I said that column K and L equal 8 together, 8 measurable
Okay.
skill gains.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct, Russell. That's correct.
Where is it? Okay. Any other questions for table 5?
Let's see. Louise said it was my understanding that a student could obtain an EFL by withdrawing and enrolling in post-secondary education prior to 6/30 of that program year.
Correct.
Which column does this EFL gain get reported?
Okay, we're going back to table 4 again. That's just it goes in 4. It's achieved a MSG, an EFL gain, column E. And also in for periods of participation as well in the later column. Column K in the new table.
Okay, and Anson's bringing up a good point. So he's saying that Sarah's comment about OSHA and SafeServe, those credentials are actually excluded in the program memo 17-2. So that's a good point. I don't actually have all the credentials memorized from that memorandum. So, but we do direct you back to that memorandum to see, what post-secondary credentials are included or allowable to be counted as a positive outcome under this indicator. And I see that he's quoting it here.
Okay, and yes, Vinu's question is the last row of table 5 on the credentials still has to be 1 year after exit. Yeah, all the criteria are still the same. It's within 1 year of exit for the credentials.
So is it Sarah Yeager that asked that question? I just wanted Sarah to draw your attention to the fact that OSHA and ServSafe are actually called out in the program memo as excluded. So I'd say everybody go back to the program memo and look at those credentials there and see what that should give you an idea. That should tell you exactly what would be included or allowable under the count as an outcome under the credential.
Okay.
Well, Gilda says I mentioned that if the state recognizes the credentials, it counts. Correct? No. I guess what I'm saying is in the program memo, and we're not really, this training is not about Program Memorandum 17-2. We would need to go back to that. I'd need to go back to that with you. So if you want to give me a call, Gilda or Sarah, you can call me up or call up your area coordinator here in Octave, and they can review with you Program Memorandum 17-2 because there are some areas where we say state recognized. High school diploma, for example, secondary school credential, that you can count that. Some states recognize high school diplomas in languages other than English, and so that would be a state-recognized secondary school credential. Other states do not. So, so using those words, you have to be careful. State-recognized isn't always something. So we have to go back to the memo and look exactly at how it's used in the context of that memo. But I just wanted to say that that's probably where we need to go to see where these credentials are. This training is not about what credentials count, what credentials don't count. This one is just to show you that there's a new row on Table 5, and that what it does is it breaks out, it doesn't break out, it actually combines the post-secondary and secondary credentials together into an unduplicated count, which will then match the number that is reported for the credential indicator on the statewide performance report. That's the joint template that we use to report outcomes under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So we've added this new row here so that NRS, the title-specific NRS Table 5, actually has, it correlates, then there's a number going to be on here that will directly match the one in the statewide performance template, and we will probably be able to auto-populate the statewide performance template from Table 5, just as we are doing that right now with Table 4. So just a little background information on why we felt that this row had to be added.
Okay. I'm sorry. One more question from Renee and Carl.
Renee asked, which students are counted in column B for attained a PSC credential while enrolled or within 1 year of exit? I'm wondering what the denominator is to determine the percentage in column B.
Well, in column B is all of the participants who are in a post-secondary program and adult ed. So, for example, a co-enrolled in post-secondary or adult ed or in an IET program or any program that's providing post-secondary services or training. So that column B would be all of those participants. And then C would be the number who achieved a credential within 1 year of exit or while enrolled. And then D is just C over B in that case. So that's how that would be calculated. Now that kind of illustrates also why we broke them out into individual, because somebody could also be getting a high school diploma and be in post-secondary. So you see that Table 5 as it exists now has some duplication in the row, across rows, not within a row, but across rows. So that's what made it a little difficult to reconcile with the state performance report, which has an unduplicated count. So that was the reason for the last column, so that we would have that unduplicated number. All right. Okay, great. So the last thing, looking at our current tables of changes, is a very simple change in tables 8 and 10, where we did two things. We wrote, again, put that column heading, first period of participation, all periods of participation, to make that clear that the table, which part of the table is covering which things. And then we just merely, all we did in 8 and 10 was change the label of that column. It used to say number of participants who exited, and that is confusing, particularly in Table 8, which is Family Literacy Program, because not all of, for example, MSG is included in that, and you don't need to exit to count MSG. So it was confusing. So this was just simply added to avoid confusion and to change number of participants included in the indicator. So sometimes the person will have had to exit. In the case of MSG, they would not have had to exit. And that's the case for 8, the family literacy optional table, and 10, the correctional ed table. So that was all we did with that table. Okay, next slide. And again, as we said, to make it clearer, that's all. And it also applies to 9 and 11, which had the same confusion or had the same confusion. And during, again, we did this change because of all the questions we got about the table last year. Those days. So that's a simple one. Any questions about that one?
Maria had a question for Table 10. So for Table 10, do all POP need to be in a 225 program? If the participant is released and later attends a different program in a new POP, is the second POP still reported on Table 10?
Well, that's a good question. Table 10 is specifically for those who were incarcerated when they were enrolled. And then you're saying they exited and go in the regular program. Let me ask Alan, what do you think about the answer to that? Give you a test, Alan. Are you there?
Well, yeah, Alan's not on the line. He couldn't be on the call today.
Jay, so someone enters in correctional, but then exits and goes into another adult ed program, a regular program, not a non-correctional institution. So they would be counted in.
And so the question is the second period of participation reported on Table 10?
Yeah. I would
No,
say yes.
no.
Oh.
No, it's not. Table 10 is if they are incarcerated.
Okay,
right. Let's go back and look at Table 10 again. Or do we have an actual screenshot
No,
of
I
it?
don't have it. No.
Okay. So Table 10 is very similar to Table 5. It has, the only difference is it has a row at the top for educational functioning level gain, or I'm sorry, measurable skill gain. And it has the same outcome, the indicators, the primary indicators of performance, the post-exit indicators, and this table has in our technical assistance guide. So I refer you all everybody back to the technical assistance guide that we just released on page E-62. So this is in Appendix E. On page 62 of Appendix E, there are instructions below Table 10 that tell you how to fill this out. And it says, the first instruction says, include only correctional education participants under Section 225 of WIOA. So if the person is released, no longer incarcerated, and they go and they enroll in adult education programs somewhere else, that student, first of all, there would be really no way for the correctional education program in that institution to be able to track whether or not that student is getting a measurable skill gain in their correctional education program. But beyond that, they're no longer being served in the section in the correctional education program. They should then be reported not on Table 10. They're reported as they are anyway. All Table 10 all students in correctional education are included anyway in Tables 1, 2, 3, 4, all of those tables, and they're also included in Table 5. Table 10 is just a subset of those tables, but we don't want to be including people here, and so that who are not in correctional education. So these columns for the second period of participation are really for participants who remain incarcerated. Maybe what happened was they dropped out of the adult education program, they exited out, but they remained incarcerated, and then after 90 days they re-enrolled in adult education, but they were still incarcerated. That's where the second period of participation would come into play for a person if they were to be reported on Table 10. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm sure that.
Terry Tackett is saying he's not sure why we would even need a second POP in Table 10. I actually can think of scenarios where somebody who's incarcerated might not be in adult education anymore but still remain incarcerated, and then maybe 4, 5, 6 months down the road they get back into adult education again. So that's what those additional periods of participation columns are for on Table 10. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
It's a little hard to completely understand because Terry's saying that's not what he's saying, but it's hard to can they unmute their phones and talk, or?
No, I think, Jay, what the question is so where would you report that second POP then if a correctional individual
on Table 5. On Table 5. Table 5 allows for additional periods of participation. So let's say we've got 2 people who are in correctional ed in the first period of participation. One leaves one is released. The other remains incarcerated. The one who remains incarcerated and gets the second period of participation is reported on Table 10, and they're reported on Table 5 as a second period of participation. The other student who was released after the first period of participation does not get reported on Table 10 as a second period of participation, but they do get reported on Table 5 as a second period of participation. So everybody in the adult education program gets reported on Table 5, everyone. It's just that on Table 10 is really just a very focused look on our students who are incarcerated and receiving our services. So if a student is no longer incarcerated, they're reported only on Table 10 for the time that they were served while incarcerated. They're always reported on Table 5. Everybody's reported on Table 5. So it's not a matter of where does that second period of participation get counted. It gets reported on Table 5 no matter what. It's just that on Table 10 it doesn't get reported if they don't remain incarcerated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't. That isn't the question still, Jay. It's let's say you're an individual who's in prison, you go to adult ed, you get released. Then you come back and enter another adult ed program. Where would you put that person?
What does that mean? What does that mean? Where would you put them?
Well, how do you count them? In what table would you put them in?
Well, I wouldn't put them on Table 10. I wouldn't put them on Table 10. What you don't put them on Table, if they're released and they go to a regular, a traditional adult education program, not serving in a correctional education setting, you report them on all the other NRS tables. And it's like if a student is in one county and they leave that adult education program and they go to another adult education program in a totally different county, then we had this question a couple years ago. We do have this question come up periodically. It has always been, this has not changed under WIOA, it has always been the responsibility of the state level data system to have business rules to handle how do I track the same student who was in this adult education program in a county in one end of the state and they went to another county in another part of the state. It's no different than a student who was incarcerated and left and went into an adult education program in the state. They're still reported on tables 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
It's just
so I think
it's not duplicated.
Right.
It's not duplicated.
So everyone's reported on Table 4 in the same way, and during the period of incarceration, that person would be pulled out and put in Table 10. So, for example, in the case of a person, let's say they were released and came back, they're always reported in Table 4, no matter what. Their incarceration is irrelevant, but the time of and that could occur the opposite as well, as Cody's pointing out, that someone could be incarcerated later after participating in adult ed and getting and then going into an adult ed program in a prison. It doesn't matter in the sense, the rules still apply, so everything would still be counted in tables 1 through 4, every individual, and 5 in some cases. But during the period of participation, that data would be pulled out and put in table 10. So it's entirely possible that it would appear in table 10 for, let's say, one period of participation, but not another. So the idea is 1 through 4 are the unduplicated count. It doesn't matter the setting. Table 10 just pulls the participants who were in that sitting during the periods of time they were in that sitting, in that setting.
And so
that's clear. It's a convoluted way to say it, but that's what it is.
That is. And actually, Russell Fenton is asking another question here in reverse. What if the student was in a regular program in POP 1 and then became incarcerated in POP 2? Which tables apply? The answer to all of these questions is always this. Tables 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of those tables apply to all participants, regardless whether they're incarcerated or not. And in Russell's example here, if a student was in a regular program, and then they became incarcerated for POP 2, then in POP 2, they're reported on table 10 as a correctional education participant.
Right. So 10 is just, it pulls out, it's a subset of the full set of data. So where Louise Miller says essentially the person is counted twice, well,
right.
Not really, but they're reported twice. So they're reported in tables 1 through 4 and reported in 10 as an incarcerated individual
exactly.
who's in the program. So
that's a great.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Who's speaking?
This is Cody, easily.
Hey, Cody.
Hey, so we actually asked this to Alan Tucker back in 2017 because the Leap Again presentation said that if a student counted in any distance education POP, they counted as distance education for all POPs for that year. So we actually asked Alan Tucker this same question regarding both family literacy and the correctional participants. And his response was that yes, for any tables that report specific participant populations, if the participant meets the definition for that subgroup at any point in the program year, then all POP data associated with that participant would be reported on the table. So is that not correct then?
So Alan told you just to count them even if they got out and came back in.
Correct. Because that was the guidance for distance education on the Leap in the Leap Again training. Got that same guidance for distance education was given for family literacy and correctional as well.
Okay.
And to me, it doesn't make sense to count someone in all POPs for distance education if they counted it in one POP and then not do the same for correctional and for family literacy. If we're going to count them only for the POP that they're incarcerated for corrections, then we should only count them in the POP that they're in distance education for distance education, or the opposite, whichever you guys prefer. But I would think it should be the same for all subsets of populations.
Yeah.
Well, it is true for distance education. Distance education is reported on table 4C and 5A, and it's always been the case. This has not changed under WIOA, that if a student, and this is a state determination, if the state, so when I was in the state office, we had a rule about, or a policy about who are we going to count as distance education students, and that has not changed even today. So the state makes its own determination as to who they're going to report, if any at all, on table 4C and 5A. And those are subsets of tables 4 and 5. And and that is true, that on table 4C, for example, you've got you do have additional periods of participation, and that is true that if the state determines that a student is reported as a distance education student, that student is reported not just for the first period of participation, but for all periods of participation, including successive ones. The difference with Table 10, and this is where I mean, Alan and I can have a conversation, after this webinar. But the difference with Table 10, I think, is that we actually have a section in the statute. There's actually, the law actually talks about this program, Section 225 in the law. The law does not talk about distance education, at least Title II does not have a separate section in the statute designated for distance education students. We actually have a requirement under the Act to report on correctional education outcomes, on correctional education student, not outcomes per se, but and I'd have to go back to the statute to look, but we in the federal office do need to report on correctional education. So I think if we're reporting on correctional education, to be clear, I think we want to distinguish between, if we really want to take a focused look at who is in correctional education and what outcomes are they achieving, then we really have to take a look, a pure look at what are they achieving while they are incarcerated. If we start adding in data to Table 10 that includes outcomes for when that student was not incarcerated, we're not getting a focused laser look on the outcomes in a correctional education setting under Section 225 of the law. Distance education, we've always had that policy. That's a state determination. Whether the state runs distance education or not is up to the state. But and so who gets included or reported on Table 4C and 5A, that's up to the state to determine. That for Table 10, it's when a student is served with funds from Section 225. That's when a student gets reported on Table 10. And I forget what your third category was. You talked about distance ed and correctional ed.
Family literacy.
But family literacy is the same thing. Family literacy is similar to, it's an optional table. Table 10 is not optional. 4C is distance ed. That's an optional table. Family literacy table is optional. But the correctional ed table, Table 10, is required. It's not optional. And I think because it's required, we want to keep our look at correctional education very focused and very targeted to the outcomes that occur while our students are in a correctional education setting. That's my personal view. I think it also may be consistent with how we have rolled out this information collection. But I would, and what happens so often with situations like this is when Alan or Larry or I are asked a question, by somebody, we always try to copy each other on our emailed responses to people so that we all know what the other person is saying, and sort of maybe we even confer before we answer these policy questions for these very reasons, so that we can know. But in the LEAP training, you're referring to something that I think you're referring to something that Alan may have said in the context of a live training workshop. Is that correct?
No, it was a follow-up email after the fact.
Okay, and it was just to him, or? I mean, this is what I'm saying. Is I think.
So
yeah.
Larry and yourself, Jay, were both copied on it.
Okay,
and it came from Alan.
Yeah, and we get hundreds of these emails, not every day, but it seems like every day. And we, sometimes things like this may not be something that one of us catches on to, or it may well be that we had a conversation about this and maybe I didn't understand what was being said. And we can go back, and Alan and Larry and I can go back and look at this question to see if it makes sense to just report anybody on Table 10, whether they're incarcerated or not, or if they had been incarcerated at any point in their time during the program year, that all additional periods of participation would also be included on Table 10. We can look at that and see if that's something we want to consider. But Table 10 itself, the outcomes on Table 10 are not they are not tied directly to the statewide performance report. What is tied directly to the statewide performance report is Table 5, which includes all participants. But Table 10...
Table 4, you mean, Jay? Table 4.
Table 4 and Table 5, when we report next year on the follow-up indicators, the exit-based indicators, Table 5, that new row for any credential, and then the employment indicators and the wage indicator, all of that will be tied back to the statewide performance report.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So I'd like to go on. I'd like to move on because we're getting locked down.
Yeah, just real quick. Given that explanation, that difference does make sense. So are you guys going to discuss that and come up with a ruling and disseminate that to all the states then?
Yeah,
well,
we will.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we will do that. I think.
Okay.
I think we can. What would happen is my preference would be to put it into the technical assistance guide. In my view, what we have in the technical assistance guide right now under the Table 10 instructions is pretty clear. It says to include people who are served under Section 225. If we decide to have them reported even after they were released, have them reported on Table 10 for the additional periods of participation, then additional periods of participation that do not occur within a correctional education setting, then we will need to put a footnote on Table 10 to that effect.
Okay.
In the technical assistance guide, yeah.
Okay, I really want to move on. So we will give some clarification about who to include in Table 10 when there's multiple periods of participation. And I'm sorry if we gave different conflicting things, Alan, and probably Jay is right. It was during the training we didn't probably think it through the way we normally do. And it never came up again, so we forgot about it. So we do need to clarify that. So I just want to move on because, and there was there's a question is, Table 5 does not include incarcerated students because how could you can't expect them to be getting credentials or getting jobs while they're in prison normally, going to post-secondary ed. So that was, I think Jay misspoke that about everyone was in Table 5. Table 5 is not every participant and not typically those are incarcerated in the 25 program. So I see a couple of questions about that. And that's right. The other question is, are students who serve 231 funds are counted in Table 10, or is it just 225? It would just be 225, I believe. I don't know who would be in 231 and not be funded by 225, but I don't know. But that's what Table 10 is for participants in programs funded by Section 225. Okay, Moira is also saying, please clarify how this instruction of including tables 4 and 5 is congruent with 2.7% data and data collection. I don't have that in front of me, Moira. If you would clarify that question, I can try to answer it. I don't know what you're referring to there. Anyway, incarcerated participants, MSG applies to them, but not the post-exit indicators unless in the unusual event they would be exited at the same time their adult ed, exited from prison, at the same time their adult ed instruction ends. And that probably rare event, that's the only time they would be, the follow-up measures would apply to them, the post-exit indicators. Otherwise, only MSG applies to them. So I don't, if that answers your question, I hope so. If not, please clarify it. I don't know what the Exhibit 2.7 is. I just don't have it in front of me. All right, I'm going to move on so we don't run out of time because we still have to cover the new tables. So let me move right into them. There are a couple of new tables. Next slide here. What I'm going to do is just explain the purpose of the table and why it's required. And you may want to explain, we're going to ask you to do a little of this, and it's particularly explain to your staff and your state the value of collecting these data, the implications of the requirement, how do you best explain them, What questions can you anticipate, and what scenarios can you develop to present the new table? And the activity packet we have will help you with all of those things. So let's move on right away to the next table. Okay, this is a brand new table that will be required in 2019 reporting. It's reportable individuals by age, ethnicity, and sex. It is identical to Table 2. The difference is that this table will only include what's called reportable individuals. These are individuals that came to your program and had some contacts but stayed less than 12 hours. So anyone that stayed less than 12 hours, we'll be asking you to report on their age, ethnicity, and sex. And it's a way. The reason we have this table is because it is a WIOA requirement to report on the characteristics of these individuals. So what we'd like to ask you now, yeah, go on. Who's that?
So is that just reportable individuals with less than 12 hours, or is that reportable individuals and participants as well?
No, Table 2A is only reportable individuals.
Okay,
Table
thanks.
2 would be participants, as it is now. Okay, so we have a discussion now, Michelle?
Yep. Similar to what we did for the first table, if you can think about what can be done at the state and program levels with the data in Table 2A, and type it in the chat box here. See whether programs are retaining students. Okay, and I'll give you just a couple more seconds to finish up your thought. Okay, at the state level, some of the responses are, as I said, retaining our programs retaining students, the assessing ability to engage and retain, whether local providers are really tracking non-participants in the state data system. For program level, also retaining students and how to provide technical assistance and address the issue of retention, looking at the orientation process, trends of students currently in the program, the role the intake process has. These are great responses. Anything additional? Does anyone have anything additional to add to this? And we're having you go through this exercise to have you sort of think through these tables and the uses of the data in these tables for when you're training your local programs and your local providers about the table changes and how they can use them for monitoring, assess recruitment. Great. I think we'll move on to the next section, the next poll.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah. We have a poll here. Okay. Sorry about that.
So if you can answer both of these questions, what are the implications of the new table for data collection at the state level? And what impacts might this new table have on local level staff as they perform data collection? And if you respond to other, type in the box. Everyone can log in their responses in the next 10 or 15 seconds, and then we'll reveal the results. Okay. So the implications at the state level, you can see a majority of people say it's difficult to know if counts are accurate, if staff are not reporting. And on the local level side, the majority, we have people saying change the way the intake is done, change the way walk-ins are recorded. For those who've selected other, on the state level side, we have things such as could be more data entry, none, they already collect all data, intake PD, no change. On the local level, again, data entry and no change or follow-up, can follow up with students for retention. So keep these in mind when you're working with the new tables and sharing it with your local programs. I think we'll move on to the next table.
Thank you, Michelle. And I see we're running out of time, so I'm going to just present the next two tables in our packet, and I'll skip the discussion. So if you have other questions, I'll try to answer them as time permits. One, I did see a question about 2A, that if a person was already a participant in one PP and then came back for less than 12 hours, would we count them on 2A? And that's a good question, one I've never thought of before because it is a new table. I don't know that we've all thought about it at the federal level. As Jay explained, when we get a question, the three of us talk about it, sometimes go to Cheryl, then we give an answer. Obviously, I can't do that now. I'm going to go on a limb and say, no, you would not count the person who's already been a participant. But I better, we'll verify that. I'll verify that. Jay, any comment before I move on about that particular question?
I'm looking at the question. I'm seeing, are reportable individuals dropped for not having a date of birth? Is that the question we're talking about?
No, somebody wrote in the chat pod, if a person came for one POP and then left and came back for less than 12 hours, would we count them in 2A as a reportable individual? I think not. But what do you think? And see, now this is a brand new table, brand new question, so that's why I don't have a definitive answer. But Jay,
well, okay, I've got the technical assistance guide, and I have it open on page E-41, and it has the instruction on table 2A, and it says, report on this table only individuals who have completed fewer than 12 contact hours in a period of participation.
So yeah.
I think what you would do is anytime somebody comes in and begins a period of participation, then and they get fewer than 12 hours, you report them on Table 2A.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm understanding is that this question is about somebody who?
Yeah.
Huh? They came in.
Yeah.
They were a participant, or they came in, didn't get 12 hours for a they didn't get 12 hours, they left for more than 90 days, and they came back, and then they got more than 12 hours. Is that what the question's about?
No, it was they were participants, and then they came back. So it should be counted then, because anyone at any POP should be counted on that table, correct?
Yeah. Yes. So yes, you would have, if a person has fewer than 12 hours in a period of participation during this program year, you would report them on Table 2A. That's what the instruction says on Table 2A.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to 4 because we are running out of time. 4A, here's a new table. Thank you, Jay. So that's the answer to 2A. 4A is a new table that has 3 key features to it. We want to break on all the MSGs. So in 4, where you only can count 1 MSG per participant, this table you can count all the MSGs the participant gets. So as a result, the second feature of it is that it's duplicate count. So one person, a single individual, could appear in multiple columns. So no matter how many, you put all the MSGs in there. And the third thing about it is we break up ELL testing gains by mathematics and by ELP or ELA literacy. So if we go through the columns, number B is column B is number of participants, unduplicated number. But then C would be any gain that participant got from a pre and post test through ELA literacy or ELP if they're an ESL student, and any gain they got on mathematics test if they were given a mathematics test. You don't have to give a math and an ELA test, for example, but if you happen to, and there was a gain there, you want to report that there. The Carnegie unit gain, you report in G, and enter into post-secondary, you report it in that column as well, in column I. So all MSGs are recorded for every individual participant, for all MSGs. So this is just a table that lets us see individually all the MSGs that are obtained during the course of a year by an individual. And that's the point of this table. So it gives us, next slide please. The reason is that so we can see all of those gains, which we can't see in Table 4. We only see unduplicated counts with one MSG per POP. And this allows us at the federal office then to look at how our gains being achieved to see that they aren't too limited to one specific area. So, for example, if the state was just giving MSTs for high school equivalencies, that would be transparent. That would show up in this table. Or for example, not enough attention being paid to post-testing or post-secondary ed or whatever the mix is. It just lets us look at each state how MSTs are being provided. Now I'm going to skip over to Table 11 since we only have a couple of minutes left. This is also a brand new table that we will be reporting next year. It is specifically only about participants in IET programs. All participants who are taking an IET, both for their first period of participation and subsequent periods of participation. And in the columns are all the indicators of performance and all the MSG indicators that are allowable. Not allowable for Table 4 reporting for adult ed, the adult ed participant not in IET, but all the ones that are required, that are allowed under the guidelines, under the WIOA guidelines. So for example, let's go through all the different rows. MSG by 1 EFL, MSG by a secondary credential, MSG by a post-secondary transcript is a MSG method that is not permitted for accountability in Title II and reported in Table 4, but we are collecting it here. Same with miles for IET participants only. Same with milestones, passing a technical exam. Those three new rows are different ways of collecting MSG that we don't typically do in adult ed, but we're collecting them on these IET students, for all periods, both first participation and subsequent periods of participation. And then in addition, we're also reporting here the post-exit WIOA indicators of employment in second and fourth quarter, employment and median earnings, and if you look at the next slide, the credential indicators as well through high school diploma, getting it through high school diploma or post-secondary. So again, this table does two things. Next slide, please. It captures IET participants. We want specifically to look at how IET participants fare in adult ed. And we're also looking at the other methods of MSG for these participants that we aren't permitting for accountability purposes under WIOA for Title II. So next. Here we go. So we want to look at their gains compared to other participants and also get information about how those other methods, what happens when we use those other methods for MSG, counting MSG that we don't allow at this time in the other programs. So we're just about out of time, but what I'll do is answer these questions, and I do want you to go be aware of our activity packet we have for you for training your local program. The questions are, the focus by subject of or all tests? Is it by focus subject or all tests? Not, oh, you're talking about table 4A again. I don't quite know what your question is. There's two sets of tests given, the math test and ELA literacy ELP. So that's what you would do in there. ELP is English language proficiency, sorry, like an ESL test. Oh, somebody answered you already. Yes, table 4A is for all POPs. It's just all the MSGs that a participant gets in all ways. We just wanted a big picture look at that. Scott asked, a listening test counted in 4A? Yes, that would be under an ELP test. And McQueen, are we now supposed to using a new test for ELA? We typically use Best Plus. No, you don't have to use a new test. It's just whatever test you're using. If it's Best Plus for ELA, it's a little confusion. ELA means English Language Arts, not ESL. It's not English Language Acquisition. It's English Language Arts, literacy. In other words, literacy tests like TABE. And ELP are your ESL tests. So Best Plus would count there. That's right, Diane. Vino, yes, there is a column for getting high school equivalency, I believe, in 4A. For attain a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, that is column F in the new table. Oh, are you talking about 4A? I'm sorry. 4A, let me look at it. Right, I'm sorry, it's not in 4A. High school equivalency this is only MSG in table 4A, not high school equivalency. That actually, it would now be in table 4, which is one of the reasons we added that new column in the future. Right, and Mindy, you did answer that already. Our Russian in B for the first 5 rows supposed to be the same. I don't know what the question is. Are the numbers in B for the first 5 rows supposed to be the same? I don't know which table you're referring to, 4B or 4A. So I don't know what you're referring to. There, sorry.
He's referring to table 11.
Oh, table 11. Okay. Yes. I mean, there would be the same rules as all the others. So MSC would be everybody except exclusions. The first 4 columns, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they would be all the same. Yes, that's correct. Any other question here? Okay, I think I answered all the questions. If you have additional questions, just email them to us. We will answer them. We'll provide you a clarification on Table 10 corrections as well. And right now, as to conclude, I'm just going to ask Michelle to briefly go over our activity packet. So we're going to skip ran out of time for discussion, so we'll skip those slides. And Michelle, would you explain briefly our activity packet?
Absolutely.
Next
You should have all received an attachment of the activity packet on the email that was sent prior to this. Though it contains 8 activities based on the tables that we've just gone through, and you can use these activities. They're listed here. Fact check, understanding table changes, which table, student data, Jeopardy, table changes in action, and key NRS changes and how to explain them. All of those activities are explained in the activity packet. It tells you how you can use them, suggestions for how to use them. They can all be adapted to be as easy or as difficult as need be for your situation and your participants. And they're all easily adaptable to be used in a webinar, printouts, and those types of various training situations that you may need. Feel free to use them all or use 1 or 2 of them. And if you have any questions, since we don't have time to run through them right now, feel free to reach out to us and if you have any questions as to how to use them. Okay.
We are past time. I'm sorry we didn't get to get everything, but it was a lot of material information.
Larry, this is Jay. I just wanted to say, just to save everybody a lot of time, I've just had an opportunity. Cody, thank you. Cody Easley has sent me the response that Alan sent to them last year about that question. It actually started out with a question about distance education, and then correctional education participants were added on to that. And like Larry said, this is something that we did not, I think that we, looked at, and I do appreciate, I think the reason that we were saying this earlier is that we were appreciating sort of the focused clarity that would come with only reporting individuals who were being served with Section 225 funds. However, I think the simplicity, I think I'm certain that when Alan sent the response out, we did discuss this, and that what he sent out was a response that, as Cody said, applied to tables 4C, 5A, 8, 9, and 10. And I do believe that for Table 10, I'm going to retract what I said earlier, which is if that person was at any time in a correctional education setting, then the first period and any other periods of participation that they had, even if they left correctional education and went to another program, your state data system would have them in there as a record. You would report all periods of participation for that participant because they were served with Section 225 funds. And Table 10 is about people who are served with that. But I think, and Cody easily makes the case that it does make it easier for state systems to be programmed, and it also limits confusion, and I do agree with that. And I agree with the simplicity and the clarity of Alan's answer that he provided last year to Cody and his colleagues. So let's stick with that and understand that there are a lot of moving parts out there that even I can't keep track of. So Table 10, it's everybody. who was ever in a correctional education setting, just like we've had that rule for years now for distance education. I think that makes it simple and consistent across the whole NRS. What do you think, Larry?
Yes, thank you, Jay. I'm glad you were able to resolve that. And,
yeah, I didn't want to wait until afterwards. I think people are on the line right now who might not get access to all of this, and so I think it keeps things clear and concise and consistent. So,
okay, thank you,
for that
Jay.
clarification.
Thank you, Cody, too, for bringing it up. And so now, since we're 10 minutes over, I'm going to move to the wrap-up and move to the last slide. There we go. There's our evaluation link if you'd like to evaluate our session. Let you know that, the appendix of the NTA guidelines, Appendix E, has all the tables, both the current ones and the ones we just have been discussing, so you can look at those at your leisure. This webinar recording will be posted in a week or so you can access that. The materials packet is also available for you to use. We have a year to put these in place. So we'll probably be having further conversations. So thank you for staying. I'm sorry we went over late, but I think the information was good and important, and appreciate your participation. I'll see you again soon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye now. Well, thank you, Jay. Bye.
Bye.